I was young once, the old human told his alien bride. But war and time took everything. John sat in the quiet of their home, looking out at the stars that filled the night sky. It was peaceful here, so different from the world he had known when he was young. The Vontari planet was beautiful, filled with lush forests, clear rivers, and calm seas. The air was clean, the sky was bright, and the people were kind. But even with all the peace surrounding him, John couldn't escape the memories that haunted him. Lyra, his alien bride, sat next to him. She was young, her skin smooth and glowing, her eyes a deep shade of violet. She had been his caretaker when he first arrived here, broken and lost after years of war. She had shown him kindness when he was at his lowest, offering him a new life on this peaceful world. But as time passed, John couldn't help but notice the differences between them. She stayed young while he grew older every day. His hair, once dark and full, had turned gray. His body, scarred from the many battles he had fought, had begun to weaken. He turned to look at her, the woman who had changed his life in ways he couldn't explain. Lyra noticed his gaze and smiled softly, her eyes filled with warmth. She could always tell when he was lost in his thoughts, thinking of the past, the wars, and the people he had lost. She knew he carried a weight with him, a burden from years of fighting that she could never fully understand. I was young once, John said quietly, his voice rough. But war and time took everything. Lyra looked at him with gentle concern. She had heard him say similar things before, but tonight it felt different. She didn't say anything at first, just reached out and took his hand in hers, her fingers warm against his weathered skin. John sighed, his gaze turning back to the stars. I was a soldier when I was young, fought in wars that seemed like they would never end. We lost so much. Our cities, our people, everything we held dear was destroyed in the blink of an eye. Lyra didn't interrupt. She knew better than to speak over him when he was remembering the past. Instead, she listened, her heart aching for him. She could never truly know what it had been like for him, growing up on a war-torn earth, but she could feel his pain. She had seen the scars on his body, but the ones on his soul were far deeper. There were days I didn't think I would make it out alive, John continued, his voice distant, as though he was reliving those moments. I saw my friends die, my comrades fall, and I kept fighting even when I didn't know why anymore. There were times when I just wanted to stop, to give up, but we kept fighting because that's what humans do. He paused, his throat tightening with emotion. We fight, and we lose, but we don't give up. Lyra squeezed his hand gently, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. She wished there was something she could say, something to ease his pain, but she knew the past could not be undone. All she could do was be there for him now, as he had once been there for her when she had first arrived on his world, a stranger in a strange land. John smiled faintly, the corner of his lips lifting slightly. I never thought I'd find peace again, he said. Not after everything, but then I met you. Lyra's heart swelled with emotion at his words, though she tried not to show it too much. She had always admired John's strength, even in his moments of weakness. He had lost so much, yet here he was, still standing, still breathing, still holding on to what little hope remained. I wasn't sure I was ready for something like this, John said softly, nodding towards their home. To love again, to trust again, but you gave me a chance, you gave me a reason to keep going. Lyra smiled, her eyes softening. You gave me a reason to hope, she replied, her voice gentle but firm. When I first met you, I saw the pain in your eyes, but I also saw something else. A strength that even the greatest warriors couldn't match. A strength that comes from surviving, from enduring. John shook his head slowly. I'm not a great man, I'm just a soldier who survived a war, and now I'm just an old man. You are so much more than that, Lyra said firmly. You're more than the battles you fought, more than the scars you carry. You're the man I chose, the man I love. John looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. He had never expected to find love again, not after everything he had been through. But somehow, Lyra had become his anchor in a world that felt so different from the one he had once known. He could feel her love, her strength, and it gave him the courage to face the days ahead. I never wanted this for you, John said, his voice thick with emotion. A life with someone like me, a man who's lived through too much. You deserve someone who hasn't been broken. Lyra's expression softened, and she leaned closer to him, her face just inches from his. I don't want someone who hasn't been broken, she said, her voice low but certain. I want you, all of you, the man who fought through the worst of it and kept going, the man who still has a heart even after everything. John was silent for a moment, his gaze searching her eyes. There was truth in her words, and something in his chest seemed to unclench just a little. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as lost as he had thought. He reached out to touch her cheek, his fingers brushing against her smooth skin. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. Lyra smiled, a warm, loving smile. "You do," she said simply. "You do." John smiled back, a genuine smile this time, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He didn't know what the future held or how much longer he had in this peaceful place. But he knew one thing for certain: he was no longer alone, and that in itself was enough. Together they sat in silence, watching the stars above them. The quiet of the night wrapped around them like a blanket, and for a moment, John allowed himself to forget the wars of his past, the pain he had carried for so long. In this moment, there was only peace and love and the quiet promise of tomorrow. John stood in the corner of the room, staring at the old photograph in his hands. It was a picture of a younger version of himself, dressed in a military uniform, standing tall beside his comrades. They were all so full of life back then, hopeful and ready to take on the world. But now those faces were just memories, faded and distant, like ghosts that would never truly leave him. Lyra stepped into the room, her footsteps quiet on the floor. She had noticed John holding the photograph, but she didn't speak at first. She knew the pain it caused him to remember those days. Instead, she walked over and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" John asked, his voice rough with the weight of his memories. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were still fixed on the photograph, as though trying to find something, some answer in its faded edges. Lyra didn't answer right away. She stood there, letting the silence stretch between them. She could feel the sorrow in his words, the deep longing for a time he would never get back. It wasn't just the people he had lost. It was the part of himself that he had given away in the name of duty and survival. The young man in that photograph had been full of dreams, of a future that had never come. "I think about it," she said softly, "but I also think about what you have now, what you've built here." John finally looked at her, his eyes tired but filled with a depth that came from years of pain and reflection. "What have I built, Lyra? A home? Yes, but it's not the same. It's not the life I imagined. I used to think that I would settle down one day, find peace, have a family, but the war changed everything. It changed me." Lyra's heart ached for him. She had heard him speak of the war before, but never like this. There was something in his tone now, something raw, as if he had finally allowed himself to admit just how deeply the war had scarred him. "You're here now," she said gently, trying to bring him back to the present. "You're not fighting anymore. You're not alone. We have each other." John shook his head, his fingers tightening around the photograph. "It's not the same. I've lost too much to ever feel whole again." Lyra's hand moved from his shoulder to his arm, and she turned him to face her. His expression was hard, as if he had closed himself off from everything, even her. But she wasn't afraid of it. She had seen him in all his pain, all his strength, and she knew that, deep down, he still had a heart capable of love. "You're not broken, John," she said softly, looking into his eyes. "You're whole, you're here with me, and that's enough, that's everything." John stared at her as if trying to make sense of her words. He had been carrying the weight of his past for so long, it was hard to imagine that something or someone could make it feel lighter. But looking at her now, seeing the love and sincerity in her eyes, he felt a flicker of hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "I'm not sure I can ever feel at peace," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra reached out, cupping his face in her hands. "You don't have to feel at peace right away, but you're here, and that's all I need." John closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. It was hard for him to accept, to believe that peace could come after everything he had been through. But in this quiet, serene world, with Lyra standing by his side, he felt something stir deep within him. Maybe peace wasn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it was about learning to live with it. "I don't know how to let go of it," John confessed. "I've spent so many years fighting, I've seen too much." Lyra's voice was calm and steady. "You don't have to let go. You just have to learn to carry it with you, to move forward not because you forget, but because you choose to live." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket, soothing the raw edges of his heart. It was a new way of thinking, a new perspective that he wasn't sure he could fully embrace. But in that moment, with Lyra's hands on his face and the weight of her love pressing against him, he felt something shift. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to move on from the past without leaving it behind completely. They stood there for a while, silently, in each other's presence. The night outside was still, the stars shining brightly above them, as if the universe itself had paused to listen to their quiet moment. It was a simple thing, this peace, but for John, it felt like a small victory. Eventually, Lyra broke the silence. "What do you think the future holds for us, John?" John looked out the window, his eyes softening as he gazed at the alien world outside. The planet was calm, untouched by the horrors he had seen. For a brief moment, he could almost forget the wars, the battles, the pain. It felt like a dream, a world where peace was real, where love was the only thing that mattered. "I don't know," he said slowly, his voice thoughtful. "But I think I'm ready to find out, with you." Lyra smiled at him, her heart swelling with love and pride. She had always believed in him, in his strength, even when he didn't believe in himself. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy for him, that his past would always be a part of him. But she also knew that he was capable of more than he realized. "Then let's find it together," she said. John nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Maybe the future wasn't as uncertain as he had once believed. Maybe with Lyra by his side he could build something new, something worth living for. They didn't need to say anything more. In that moment, with the weight of the past lifting just a little, they stood together, ready to face whatever came next. Together, days passed, and the routine of their life together began to settle in. John found comfort in the quiet moments he shared with Lyra, morning walks through the lush forests, evenings by the glowing river that ran through their home, and nights spent watching the stars. There were no wars here, no battles to fight, only the peaceful silence of a world that was so different from the one he had known. And for the first time in many years, John began to feel like he could breathe again. But there were still moments, brief but sharp, when the past would catch up with him. The nightmares, the memories, the faces of those he had lost. They would come rushing back, and for a moment the peace of the present would shatter, leaving him feeling as though he were drowning in a sea of regret and grief. He would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sweat beading on his brow. And each time Lyra would be there, her calming presence grounding him. One such night, after a particularly vivid nightmare, John sat on the edge of their bed, his head in his hands. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting soft shadows across the room. He had woken up, his chest tight, his mind racing with memories of the past. The screams, the explosions, the constant fight for survival, it was all too much. It felt as though it had happened only yesterday, though so many years had passed. Lyra stirred beside him, her soft breath slowing as she woke. She sat up, her violet eyes searching his face, sensing the tension that hung in the air. She didn't ask him what was wrong. She already knew. She reached out, her hand finding his, her fingers wrapping around his like a lifeline. "John," she said softly, her voice soothing, "come back to me." He didn't respond at first. His eyes were distant, his mind still trapped in the nightmares, but he didn't pull away either. Lyra's presence was the only thing that kept him from falling deeper into the darkness. Slowly, he let out a shaky breath and turned his head to look at her. Her face was peaceful, but he could see the concern in her eyes. She was always so strong, always so steady, and yet she never pushed him to talk when he wasn't ready. She just let him be, letting him know that she would be there for him no matter what. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I keep thinking about all the people I couldn't save, all the ones who died because of me." Lyra's heart ached as she listened to his words. She knew how deeply the weight of guilt pressed on him. She had seen it in the way he carried himself, in the moments when he would go quiet, lost in his thoughts. She had heard him speak of the wars, the battles, the decisions he had made that still haunted him. But what he didn't realize, what he couldn't see, was that none of it was his fault. The war had been beyond his control. He had done what he had to do to survive, to protect those he loved. And yet, the guilt remained, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. "You didn't cause it, John," she said gently, squeezing his hand. "You did everything you could. You fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. You gave everything for others, and that makes you stronger than any of them." John shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't feel strong, I feel broken." Lyra reached up, cupping his face in her hands, her touch gentle but firm. "You're not broken, you're human, and that's what makes you so strong. It's not the battles you fought or the wars you survived, it's your heart. It's your love, your kindness. Those are the things that matter, John." John closed his eyes, leaning into her touch, allowing himself to feel the warmth of her love. He didn't know how to explain the weight of his past, the way it had shaped him, the way it still held him in its grip. But he also knew that Lyra was right. He had done what he could. He had survived when so many others hadn't. And now here with her, he had a chance to rebuild. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to let go of it," John said quietly. "The memories, the guilt, it's like a part of me I can't escape." Lyra's thumb brushed softly against his cheek. "You don't have to let go of it. But you can learn to live with it, to honor the past but not be ruled by it." John opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. She smiled at him, a small but reassuring smile, as if telling him that everything would be okay. It was the same smile she had given him on the day they first met, when he had been broken and lost, unsure of his place in the universe. And somehow it was enough to make him believe that maybe, just maybe, he could start to heal. "You're right," he said softly. "I don't need to forget, I just need to move forward." Lyra nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "And I'll be here every step of the way." For a long moment they sat there in silence, the weight of the night lifting just a little. Outside, the stars continued to shine, their light steady and unwavering. The world around them was calm, and for the first time in a long time, John felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew that. His past would always be a part of him, lingering like a shadow that never quite disappeared. But with Lyra by his side, he felt a glimmer of hope that the future could be different. That maybe, after all the loss and the pain, there was still a chance for happiness. "I'm glad I found you," John said, his voice soft but filled with sincerity. Lyra smiled, leaning in to kiss him gently on the cheek. "I'm glad you let me in." And in that moment, John knew that he wasn't alone anymore. He had someone who cared, someone who would stand with him through the darkness and the light. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days continued to pass slowly, the quiet routine of their life together stretching out before them like the calm horizon of the peaceful planet. John had started to embrace the new reality he was building with Lyra. The nights were filled with peaceful sleep, free of the nightmares that had haunted him for so long. The mornings were filled with light, the warmth of the sun brushing against his skin as he walked through the vibrant forests with Lyra by his side. Still, there were moments when John found himself pausing, staring at nothing in particular, lost in the thoughts of a life long gone. It wasn't that he wanted to go back to the wars, to the battles. No, he had made peace with that part of his life. It was the weight of it all, the lives lost, the things he had done, that lingered in the back of his mind. Even in the peace of this world, he sometimes felt like he was carrying an invisible weight, something he couldn't shake. Lyra noticed the change in him. While he had grown more at ease with their life together, there were times when the shadows from his past would sneak back in. He would become quiet, distant, and she could see the faraway look in his eyes. It was never for long, but each time it came, she could feel the distance between them grow, even if it was only for a moment. One evening, as they sat outside their home, watching the sky turn a deep shade of violet as the sun set behind the hills, John spoke about the past again, something he hadn't done in a while. "I've been thinking about the day the war ended," he said, his voice quiet as he gazed at the fading light. "It was supposed to feel like a victory, like we had done it, but it didn't. It just felt empty, like everything I had fought for had no meaning in the end." Lyra didn't respond right away. She knew that this was something John had carried with him for years, and it wasn't something that could be fixed with a few words. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the roughness of his calloused fingers against her soft skin. She squeezed his hand gently, offering him the quiet support that he had come to rely on. "The war didn't change what you are, John," Lyra said softly. "It didn't define you. You're more than the battles you fought, more than the things you had to do. You're a man who survived when so many didn't. That's what matters." John turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face as if looking for some sign that she truly understood. "I don't know, Lyra," he said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I've done things I'm not proud of, things that will never go away no matter how hard I try to forget them." Lyra leaned closer, her eyes steady and full of warmth. "You don't have to forget them, John. You just have to learn to live with them. The past doesn't control you. You have a future now. You have a life with me." John looked down at their intertwined hands, the simplicity of their connection reminding him of the peace he had found in Lyra's love. He had been so focused on the things he had lost, the things he couldn't change, that he hadn't fully embraced the life he had now. The weight of his past had kept him from seeing the future that lay ahead. "You're right," John said after a long pause. "I've been holding on to the past for too long. It's hard to let go, but I know I need to. Lyra smiled, her face glowing in the soft light of the setting sun. We're in this together, John. You don't have to do it alone. John smiled back, the warmth of her love filling him like a gentle tide. It was true, he didn't have to carry the weight of his past on his own. He had Lyra, and that was something he had never expected to find after everything he had been through. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace begin to settle inside him, like a seed planted in fertile soil, slowly starting to grow. The next few days were a blur of small moments, Lyra teaching John the customs of her people, their shared meals, the laughter that filled the quiet moments of their life. John felt something inside him shift, a realization that he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields outside their home, John felt the familiar weight of the past lift just a little more. They came to a small hill, the view of the valley stretching out below them. The colors of the landscape were bright and full of life, everything so different from the barren, war-torn world he had left behind. Lyra stopped beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Do you like it here?" she asked, her voice soft as the wind rustled the leaves in the trees. John looked out over the valley, the peaceful landscape stretching out before him. For the first time, he didn't just see a place to survive. He saw a future, he saw hope. "I do," he said quietly, turning to her. "I think I'm finally starting to." Lyra smiled, the joy in her expression lighting up her face. She had always believed that John could find peace here, that this world could offer him the healing he needed. She had never given up on him, even when he had given up on himself. They stood there for a while, looking out at the world around them. It was quiet, the only sounds the gentle breeze and the distant chirping of the birds. It felt like time had slowed, allowing them to just be, to exist in this moment of calm. "I've always dreamed of a life like this," John said, his voice low. "A life where the fighting is over, a life where I don't have to worry about the next battle, the next war." Lyra nodded, her hand resting on his chest. "And now you have it," she said softly. "We have it." John looked down at her, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I never thought I'd find peace. I never thought I'd find someone who would understand, who would still love me after everything I've done. But here we are." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with affection. "You deserve this peace, John. You've earned it." For the first time in a long while, John truly believed it. He had spent so much time running from his past, from the mistakes and the pain, that he had forgotten what it was like to just be. But now, standing here with Lyra, he felt the weight of it all begin to lift. He didn't have to forget the past, but he didn't have to be ruled by it either. He was ready to face whatever came next. With Lyra by his side, he knew that he could. Together, they turned and walked down the hill, their hands still clasped tightly. The world was still, and for the first time it felt like everything was exactly as it should be. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Life with Lyra became a rhythm, one that John found surprisingly comforting. The mornings were filled with simple tasks, tending to their small garden, enjoying the sunlight as it filtered through the trees, and taking long walks through the countryside. There was no rush, no need to hurry. Everything was slow and steady, like the gentle flow of the river that ran beside their home. John had come to appreciate the quiet moments. He had spent so many years fighting, so many years on edge, always waiting for the next attack, the next battle. But here, in this peaceful world, he could simply exist. He could wake up in the morning without the fear that something would be taken from him. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was constantly running. Lyra, as always, was a steady presence in his life. Her strength, her kindness, and her unwavering love never wavered. She had never pushed him to forget the past. Instead, she had given him the space to heal, to come to terms with the things he couldn't change. She had been there for him when he had needed her the most. And now, as the seasons changed, she remained his anchor, the one person he could rely on without question. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, John looked at Lyra with a new sense of clarity. For so long, he had been trapped by the ghosts of his past, unsure of how to move forward. But now, with her by his side, he understood that peace wasn't something that happened all at once. It was something that came in small moments, in the quiet shared between two people who truly understood each other. "I never thought I'd get here," John said softly, his gaze fixed on the changing colors of the sky. "I spent so many years thinking I didn't deserve peace, thinking I didn't deserve happiness. Lyra turned to him, her eyes gentle, her smile warm. You deserve it more than anyone I know. John chuckled softly, shaking his head. I don't know about that, but I know one thing: I don't feel like I'm just surviving anymore. I'm living. Lyra's heart swelled at his words. She had always believed in him, even when he hadn't believed in himself. She had known, from the moment they met, that he had the strength to heal. But hearing him say it, hearing him finally believe it, made everything they had been through together feel worth it. I'm glad you feel that way, she said, her voice full of love. You're not just living, John, you're thriving. John turned to face her fully, his heart lighter than it had been in years. I owe a lot of that to you, he said quietly. You've shown me what it means to be whole again. Lyra smiled, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. I didn't do anything. You did all the hard work. You just needed someone to remind you that you were worthy of happiness. John reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and steady. I don't think I'll ever be able to fully express what I feel for you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I'll try, every day. Lyra's eyes softened, and she leaned in to kiss him gently on the cheek. You don't need to say anything, I already know. For a long moment they sat in silence, their hands still intertwined. The world around them was calm, the air cool and crisp as the stars began to appear in the sky. It was the kind of night that made everything feel still, as if time had slowed just for them. John looked up at the stars, the same stars he had looked at countless times during the war, wondering if they would ever see peace. But now he understood something. Peace wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one that he had started walking step by step with Lyra by his side. We've come a long way, John said, his voice quiet but filled with pride. Lyra nodded. And we're just getting started. John smiled, feeling a sense of calm that he hadn't known in so many years. He no longer felt like he was running away from something. Instead, he felt like he was moving toward something, toward a future filled with hope, with love, and with the kind of peace he had always dreamed of but never thought possible. The next morning, as the sun rose once more over the peaceful landscape, John and Lyra began their day together. It was like any other day, filled with simple moments and quiet joy. But for John, it was different now. Every step he took, every breath he took, felt like a victory. The past was still there, lingering in the background, but it no longer defined him. He had found a new purpose, a new reason to keep moving forward. Lyra was there, always by his side, her love a steady presence that reminded him of everything worth fighting for. And together they would face whatever the future held, knowing that they were stronger than they had ever been. As they worked in the garden later that afternoon, John paused for a moment, looking around at the life they had built together. The sun was warm on his back, the air filled with the sweet scent of flowers, and the sound of birds singing in the trees echoed in the distance. It was the kind of world he had never thought possible, the kind of world he had always dreamed of, but never believed he could have. And yet here he was. He turned to Lyra, a soft smile on his face, and in that moment he understood what it meant to truly be at peace. It wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing the pain. It was about finding the strength to move forward, to keep going even when everything seemed lost. It was about love, and the way it could heal even the deepest wounds. I love you, John said simply, his voice filled with the depth of everything he felt. Lyra smiled back, her eyes filled with affection. I love you too. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of their world, John realized that this was enough. He had found peace, not in the absence of pain, but in the love they shared, in the life they had built together. And for the first time in a long time, he felt whole.